Ready or not, summer is coming, and Wayfair's Memorial Day clearance is on now. Right now through May 25th, get up to 70% off everything home at Wayfair. Plus, score amazing doorbuster deals all sale long and surprise flash deals on Memorial Day. We're talking thousands of products at every style and budget. Now is the time to save big on must-haves for your patio, backyard, and beyond. These savings won't last, so don't wait. Shop Wayfair's Memorial Day clearance now through May 25th.
Wayfair, every style, every home.
Oh yeah, look at my life, hey now, yeah. Oh yeah, look at my life out here on the road. Oh yeah, look at my life, hey now, yeah. Oh yeah, look at my life out here on the road.
Hey now! How's it going, everybody? Welcome to Scott Fox After 9. This episode is going to be jam-packed. I'm going to take you to a couple of different provinces today. We're going to talk about the Snowbirds today, and we're going to talk about e-scooters and e-bikes. There's an interesting proposal from one of the people who wants to be the mayor of Toronto about how we can regulate those and try and keep some of these, some of them are very fast, by the way, how we can keep some of these out of the bike lanes and off of the sidewalks. All of that and more coming up on this episode. Before I get too far into it, though, a number of people have been reaching out to me about a number of different scandals that are starting to break. Some of them are a little bit on the conspiracy theory side. So hear me out. Don't dip out just because I said I'm going to talk about a conspiracy theory. But how many people have seen these reports that a wave of ticks are coming toward us this summer? A wave of ticks. Where are these ticks coming from, and why are these ticks ones that, when they bite you, they make you allergic to eating red meat? You know, it's been a conspiracy theory for a number of years now that the powers that be don't really want us eating red meat. They want the cows gone, and they want all the Wagyu kept for themselves. They don't want us eating red meat. Well, we're not stopping, right? I think by and large, most people agree. We're not going to stop eating burgers. We're not going to stop eating steaks. What's the deal with this? Why do they want us eating bugs instead of steaks? Well, some of them would make the case that it's about sustainability. And if people aren't going to voluntarily give up red meat, does it make sense that someone somewhere would get some sinister idea to release a wave of genetically engineered ticks that make people allergic to eating red meat? That's where a lot of people's brains went when they heard there's a wave of ticks coming our way, and those ticks will make us allergic to red meat. That's something to keep an eye on. I don't really know where it's coming from. I don't know who would make these ticks or if they were just created organically, so to speak. I don't know, but I'm reading a lot about it. And the other conspiracy theory that I want to touch on here, this is not my reporting. I'm going to give full credit to Avery Haynes. She is a journalist with Bell Media, and if I'm not mistaken, she's on a show called W5. Well, I don't watch W5 very often, but I'm led to believe they've got an interesting expose on right now about the number of people that have flown out of Canadian airports, Pearson Airport, Toronto in particular, where they checked their bag as usual, they went through security, they got on the plane, and then, bam, they got hauled into secondary because they were smuggling drugs. Seems that there are some bad actors working at the airport. They may have been infiltrated by organized crime. That's kind of the way it sounds like this is going. And they're swapping out bag tags. They're putting a different tag on it, and what they're doing is they're filling suitcases full of drugs. I'm told there's everything from cocaine to methamphetamine. They fill a suitcase full of drugs, and then they put your bag tag on it so that if somebody gets caught, it looks like that bag is yours and you were smuggling the drugs. Hey, we've got to have some basic protections for Canadian travelers. The vast majority of us are not trafficking narcotics. We shouldn't be accused of trafficking narcotics. The first instinct should be, did somebody tamper with the bag? But there's a lot of Canadians who are being put in a spot where they've got to defend themselves as if there's some sort of a drug dealer. That's craziness. Craziness. The powers that be, they got to get that one under control. Now, I'm going to jump into some of the content. These are things that I think you should hear for the day. A few things that after you listen to this pod, I think you're going to be a little bit more caught up on what's going on in the world. And we'll start off on the left coast of Canada, British Columbia, where Premier David Eby isn't feeling the love from the Prime Minister.
The message to the Prime Minister is simple. This country cannot work if separatist premiers, others get all of the attention of the federal government. And those provinces where we're standing squarely behind Canada, where we're fighting for Canada, where we couldn't be more pro-Canadian in the projects we're advancing, where we're left out of the discussion. That's a very straightforward message from me to the Prime Minister, and I'm hopeful he agrees with that, because we have huge projects here in the province that are going to employ thousands and thousands of British Columbians and Canadians from across the country. It's going to raise the national GDP. It's going to raise the value of the Canadian dollar. Some of these projects are that big. And we're training up British Columbians to be able to take the jobs these projects create so they have more money to cope with rising expenses as a result of global inflation. We are doing this work. We need to do it together. And we need to have at least as much enthusiasm from the federal government for BC projects as they've shown for Alberta projects.
Sounds like sour grapes to me. If I'm being honest, that's how it sounds from BC Premier David Eby. See, David here is upset that the Prime Minister is focusing on trying to get some sort of a deal done with Alberta. Now, if he does get a deal done with Alberta, it accomplishes a couple of different things. Number one, he can say, I have quashed the national unity issues. Alberta will no longer want a referendum. I'm giving them a pipeline. But the only way he's giving them a pipeline is if a whole bunch of green ideology goes into it and various green industries start thriving. Okay, well, the Prime Minister wants to get that deal done. Is he doing it, though, at the expense of British Columbia? I don't think he is. You know, I think the Premier of British Columbia is out to lunch on this one. I don't see this as the Prime Minister trying to suck up to one Premier. I also think it was gross that he referred to Danielle Smith, Alberta Premier, as a separatist Premier. Danielle Smith has been very emphatic about this. She is not a separatist premier. She wants to see an independent Alberta within a united Canada. There's nothing wrong with that. Alberta's got a lot of resources, and the federal government has stood in their way for years from developing those resources and being the true economic powerhouse that they want to be. David Eby coming on here and complaining like he is, I don't think that's doing much to solve the actual problem here. And the problem is very simple. Alberta has been held back for years, and in a lot of cases, provinces like British Columbia benefited from that. Well, now it's time for Alberta to shine. Now it's time for Alberta to start getting that oil out to market and start being a very prosperous province. BC is jealous? Is that it? Are they feeling lonely? Are they feeling rejected? What deal did they put forward that the Prime Minister emphatically rejected? None that I'm aware of. So I don't quite understand where the British Columbia Premier is coming from on that one. However, the Prime Minister was in the news yesterday. I'm going to get to him in just a second, answering some questions. Some of them had to do with the Snowbirds. The Snowbirds are retiring at the end of the year. They are at the end of their life, and they will no longer fly after the upcoming air show season. Here is a representative from the Canadian Armed Forces making that announcement yesterday.
Today marks a profound moment for the Royal Canadian Air Force, for 431 Air Demonstration Squadron, for the Snowbirds, past and present, and for the Canadians across the country. For 55 extraordinary years, the Snowbirds Air Demonstration Team has delivered excellence in the skies and on the ground as ambassadors of the Royal Canadian Air Force. They have inspired generations of Canadians, have sparked dreams in young people who have watched precision, teamwork, and professionalism painted against a blue Canadian sky. The CT-114 Tudor fleet will retire after 63 years of operation, and 431 Air Demonstration Squadron, the Snowbirds, will be temporarily stood down following the conclusion of the 2026 show season. During this transition, our connection with Canadians will not lag. You will continue to see the RCAF across the country, though through aircraft and personnel participation in air shows, through our RCAF attractions team, through immersive virtual reality experiences, and other innovative performances that bring aviation to life in new ways. So stay tuned. While the retirement of the CT-114 Tudor brings understandable emotion, I encourage all Canadians to see the upcoming 2026 season for what it truly is, a chance to celebrate. Let's recognize the families of 431 Squadron, who have made tremendous sacrifices, giving up months each year so that their loved ones could bring pride and joy to Canadians nationwide. We will honor the members of 431 Squadron Snowbirds past and present.
The microphone not great there. They did definitely have some audio issues. And so you know, RCAF is the Royal Canadian Air Force. The Snowbirds are being retired after 63 years. Let me ask you a question. If you got to the airport and you were heading down to, I don't know, Jamaica, Barbados, Antigua, you name it. You get to the airport and they tell you, hey, the plane you're flying on is 63 years old. How are you going to feel about that? How do you think our armed forces feel about flying these planes around? I don't know if they're feeling all that safe and secure. Hey, listen, the Snowbirds are great. I love them. I'm a huge fan of aviation and a huge fan of the Royal Canadian Air Force. I think what they do is amazing, and I think that what the Snowbirds do in particular draws people into the armed forces. I think it's good for recruitment. But at the end of the day, all good things have to come to an end. And the Snowbirds, I think, need to come to an end. I'm not trying to side with the government here, but I mean, holy cow. They're over 60 years old. These Tudor jets, I don't know if they're safe. It's also very, very difficult to get parts for them now. It's very expensive to operate these things. I think it's the right time. But that's not to say that this government gets off scot-free. I'm going to play for you a question and answer. This is for the Prime Minister. He's going to talk about the Snowbirds, and then I want to weigh in on this too, because I think this probably could have been done very, very differently and probably a lot more effectively.
At a time when you're promoting national unity and pride and with all these announcements, why ground the Snowbirds for years instead of kind of keeping them afloat while you get the new planes?
A couple of things. First, I arrived with the situation with the Snowbirds, the planes, which had been, and I've, like many Canadians, have enjoyed the demonstrations of the Snowbirds over the years. It's absolutely extraordinary, and a source of pride, as you say, Rafi. We inherited a situation, or I inherited a situation where the planes literally had come to the end of their lives. They were unique in many respects. They didn't have the parts and other things to safely fly. So the Snowbirds will continue, and new planes are being commissioned and will arrive. So sometimes you inherit things that you move as fast as you can. At the center, I agree with the sentiment of your question. This is part of our heritage, like the musical ride.
Okay, so the Prime Minister is right about the fact that he inherited this problem, and that's part of the issue here. The federal Liberals have known for years the Snowbirds need to be replaced. They've been messing around with military procurement for over a decade now. Keep in mind, when Stephen Harper was still Prime Minister, he ordered the F-35 jets. To help get elected, Justin Trudeau said, I'm going to cancel that purchase. We don't need them. So we canceled it. We had to pay a big penalty to get out of that deal. Then Justin Trudeau decided, it turns out we do need them. So we had to pay even more for them. And now we might cancel that deal again because of this little spat with the Americans. The Trudeau government could have replaced these Tudor jets at any time. They could have said, hey, listen, the Snowbirds are coming to life's end here. We're going to have to get a replacement. And by the way, we've ordered a replacement already. They're not exactly the same. They're not jets. They're turboprops, but they are quite quick and fairly acrobatic. I don't know if they're going to be as good as the Snowbirds, but I'm going to trust the judgment of the RCAF that when they were consulted on this, and God, I hope they were, that these jets were a suitable replacement. Why didn't we do this sooner? We knew this needed to be done. Now we're going to go years, not just without the Snowbirds flying, but also without those pilots doing that kind of training. It's really, really good for military pilots to fly those Tudor jets. Now we have to wait years to get the replacement. This was not handled well by the federal government. This is a major symptom of government. So slow. So slow. Procurement should be an important thing. You've got to look down the line. Watch where the puck is going, not where it is. Where the puck was going is we were going to need to replace those jets. Why would we wait until they're completely useless to start even ordering new ones? Oh, and one more thing. It was only a couple of years ago, the government said they were going to invest over $30 million retrofitting those jets to prolong their life to about 2030. Well, clearly that was money wasted. because the Snowbirds are not going to fly after this season. I'm also kind of wondering if they're safe for this season. I don't know what to think here. This could have been handled differently, but at the end of the day, I do think the government got this right. It's time to retire that fleet, put them in prominent places as a symbol of national pride, but let's bring in the next round. You know, when it comes to procurement and military, I almost wonder if maybe Canada's got this wrong. Let me just float an idea out there for you. What if we did this? Canada is not ready. We don't have the money to be spending 5% of our GDP on military defense. We just don't. Our taxes are going to have to go way up to meet the commitment that Mark Carney agreed to. Even getting to the 2% is costing us a fortune. Why don't we just do this to help smooth things over with the Americans? Why don't we buy their used jets? They want to fly them for what, 5-10 years and then retire them and get the newest, latest and greatest and all that sort of thing? Fine. Give us the used ones. We'll buy them from you at a discounted rate. We'll maintain them. And then we've got a consistent fleet throughout North America. Why wouldn't we do that? Why wouldn't we at least pitch that idea? It'd be cheaper for us. We get jets right away. We've got a constant supply. As planes in the U.S. age out, they just go north of the border, and we use them to fly them over the Arctic. What's wrong with that idea? Don't you think the Americans would love that? Getting some of those used jets that they can't really resell to anyone else, get them off the books and give them a little money to buy new stuff. And at the end of the day, if we're working together, we're going to need them to have the new stuff anyway because they're going to help defend us. Speaking of the Prime Minister, let's go to Queen's Park in Ontario. You've likely heard by now that Ontario Premier Doug Ford is floating the idea of extending the runway at Billy Bishop Airport. That's the Toronto Island Airport. Right now, that runway is not big enough for jets to land on. It's at most big enough for the turboprops, the twin turboprops that Porter flies. That's about the biggest plane that can land there unless they extend the runway. Well, Doug Ford came out with some crazy numbers about expanding the island airport and saying that would improve the economy by billions of dollars a year. Well, I don't see that personally, and right now this idea is being debated in committee at Queen's Park. Yesterday, a New Democrat member of Parliament, his name is Chris Glover, he was participating in that committee hearing. Afterwards, he came out and spoke to the media. He said something very interesting about jets at the Toronto Island Airport and our Prime Minister.
We got a couple of answers. We can confirm that there is no business case for this. The government has not looked at the cost benefits of expanding this airport, because that's exactly what they did at Ontario Place. They leaked into this Ontario Place deal, and then it ended up costing taxpayers $2.2 billion. It sounds that Carney is behind this. Ontario Minister of Transportation said that he's in regular communications with his federal minister counterpart. The Minister of Transportation said that the Toronto Port Authority has a vision. But the Toronto Port Authority is an agency of the federal government. So this would not be going forward without Carney's support. And so it sounds like Carney's actually behind the scenes pulling the strings for this project. We're putting pressure on the federal government, and I would ask that you as journalists please ask the Prime Minister and the Liberal MPs in Toronto to take a stand. Are they for jets at the airport? Are they opposed to it? Because if they're for them, then they should take responsibility, and this cannot happen without the federal government's approval because airports are federally regulated.
Okay, Chris Glover is absolutely right. Airports are federally regulated. It does make sense if the Prime Minister is behind this. He likes to fly around in private jets. He's a very wealthy individual. It's nice that he's Prime Minister and he has a whole fleet of private jets at his beck and call, but we all know he likes private jets. Is it possible that the Prime Minister himself is the one who is trying to strong-arm Doug Ford into making the island airport in Toronto bigger so private jets can land there? And you know, it's funny because they're being very misleading with the public about this. Very misleading. They're suggesting tens of thousands more people are going to come to Toronto because you can land a jet half an hour closer to downtown than you can if you land at Pearson Airport. If you land at Pearson, very, very simple. There's many options to get downtown, not the least of which is we have a dedicated train route that goes directly from the airport to Union Station right downtown. It couldn't be any easier, but that's not good enough for the politicians. They do not want to take that train. They would much rather land at the island airport on jets. Doug Ford tried to buy a jet. Starting to add up, right? I'm starting to wonder if we've been sold a lemon here. They tried to tell us this was going to be great for the economy. Is it going to be great for the economy, or is it going to be great for politicians and people that have private jets? How much demand is there to land at Pearson with a private jet? How is that going to bring tens of thousands of people here? You know, the implication when they explain it to the public is, hey, with all these jets landing, people are going to be coming from all over the world. Make no mistake. There's not going to be some big 777 from Europe landing at the Toronto Island Airport. It's just not going to happen. They'll continue to land at Pearson. Yes, some jets will be able to land downtown, but the vast majority of them are not going to be big jets bringing in thousands of passengers. It's just not going to happen. So let's get a little honesty here. Toronto has traditionally been opposed to expanding the island airport to allow for jets to land. So then let's hear from the Toronto members of parliament, who, by the way, are mainly liberals. Let's hear from those liberal members of parliament and question, why hasn't the media asked any Toronto liberal members of parliament about expanding the airport? When's that inquisition coming? I'd like to know where they stand on that, because you know what? Then they're going to have to make a choice. Do they defy the boss, Mark Carney, or do they betray their constituents who put them there in Ottawa? There's going to be more on this. Now I want to take you to Halton Region. For those who don't know, Halton Region is directly west of Peel Region. It goes Toronto, Peel, Halton. Halton is where I come to you from every day in Burlington, Ontario. It also includes Oakville, Ontario, Halton Hills, and Milton, Ontario. Well, the chief of police here is named Steve Tanner. Steve is an absolute rock star when it comes to public safety. He is a fantastic chief of police. Yesterday, he held a news conference to announce the results of Project Cypress, a major drug trafficking investigation and a huge seizure of illegal firearms. I want you to listen very carefully. This is Halton, but it could be anywhere in Canada. Listen to this chief of police.
What is particularly concerning and frankly alarming is that all of the firearms seized in this investigation originated from the United States. The vast majority of crime guns in Halton Region and surrounding areas originate from the U.S. In fact, recent police data shows that in most jurisdictions, it is around 90% of handguns recovered from violent crimes are traced back to the U.S.
Around 90%. 90% of the illegal handguns that are used in crimes in Canada are coming from the United States. Now, that's something that many of us have suspected for a long time. We could basically call it fact, but there's still some people who want to dispute that. Who are those people? The federal government. They're the ones who still want to go ahead with this federal gun buyback program, which is going to cost taxpayers millions upon millions of dollars. And as you just heard from the chief of police in Halton, probably not going to make our streets any safer. Not at all. Because the illegal guns are coming from America. So let me ask you, does it make sense to keep spending taxpayer money to try and clean up the streets by getting those guns away from duck hunters? Or does it make more sense to spend money at the border and try and prevent those illegal guns from making it into our cities? I think the answer is obvious. Quick thing here. The numbers from the Parliamentary Budget Office are out regarding the World Cup. The Parliamentary Budget Office is now saying it's going to cost over $1 billion in public funds to host the World Cup in Canada. That's just our portion. $1 billion between municipal, provincial, and federal governments. Over $1 billion. When you break it down over 13 games, that works out to $82 million per game. I mean, we won't even make that back in sales. We won't make that back in hotels. Numbers out yesterday from Vancouver. Reservations in hotels in Vancouver during the period that the World Cup is on, not up, they're down 20% year over year. A 20% decline in hotel bookings for Vancouver while the World Cup is on. I think this is going to be a major bust. There's nothing we can do about it now except enjoy the World Cup. However, going forward, We've got to start having conversations about what we do and don't bid on. You know, we put up millions and millions of dollars to try and host things like the World Cup, the Olympics, and things like that. How about we don't bid on anything that's not at least going to break even? How about that? Can we agree on that? If it's not at least going to break even, we don't do it. At some point, we got to look in the mirror and accept the fact that we are broke in this country and we can't keep pissing away money on pet projects. Some politician gets some report drawn up that says, oh, it's going to be a massive increase to our GDP. Oh, with the tourism dollars factored in, we're going to make millions on this thing. No, we're not. In hard dollars, we're going to lose a lot. $82 million a game. And by the way, that's one of the cheaper game hosting fees. In the past, other countries have paid more than $82 million. Now, those countries built new stadiums. We didn't even do that. We just put in some temporary grandstands at BMO Field in Toronto and called it a World Cup venue. $82 million a game, over $1 billion to host the World Cup in Toronto for just over a month. Wild to me. Now let's get to some health emergencies that are happening across the country. Actually, not this one yet, although I am a little bit worried, especially with the World Cup coming up. I'm worried about Ebola. For a while there, the Hunta virus seemed like it was going to be the one. That one's dying off quickly. So now the UN is quickly pivoting to Ebola being the next big issue. Let's go to Dr. Tedros from the World Health Organization. Here's him talking about Ebola.
After declaring the peak, I immediately convened an emergency committee under the IHR, which met yesterday and agreed that the situation is a public health emergency of international concern, but is not a pandemic emergency. WHO assesses the risk of the epidemic as the high at the national and regional levels and low at the global level.
Does that make you feel any better? Public health emergency of international concern. That's what they're calling Ebola now. Public health emergency of international concern. But he did not call it a pandemic. Very, very interesting.
Wondering if you could comment on the decision by the US to impose a travel ban on Uganda, DRC, and South Sudan, and whether you have any advice or recommendations for countries with more direct links to travel links to those countries on whether that would be an appropriate public health measure to take. Thank you.
Thanks for that question. Well, WHO recommendation for a long time is evidence and science-based and solidarity. For some time, we know what works. What works is contact tracing, monitoring those contacts, isolation, and immediate referral. Give you an example, like Uganda has done an incredible amount of work in tracing all the contacts and putting them in an institution or home quarantine and monitoring them. So we encourage all contacts, and our recommendation, we'll hear from the emergency committee what the recommendations are. All contacts, all cases should not travel. So we would like to all countries and appreciate what they have done so far. That's the first step of defense in terms of a global health security. Second element, countries are doing point of exit screening. Both Uganda, DRC are already doing that. So in support of the activity done by Uganda and DRC and going in this humanitarian conflict area, supporting them is the best medicine for the entire world in support of solidarity of DRC. It's a complex, as DG said, hundreds of thousands displaced population, insecurity, travel restrictions. Countries have sovereign, they do their own risk assessment, but they do have to provide to us the justification and the rationale behind their mandates.
I'm going to stop this clown right here. That is the World Health Organization opposing the American travel ban on Ebola-affected countries. Uganda, Congo, you name it. They don't want people coming to America who could have been exposed to Ebola. And frankly, I don't blame them. The World Health Organization there opposes that idea and thinks that any country who does want to do that should have to justify their actions to the World Health Organization. Absolutely not. Hey, I don't know if this is going to turn into a pandemic or not. I have no idea. I know they seem concerned. A public health emergency of international concern is what they're calling Ebola already. Well, if some country wants to be proactive and say, we're not accepting anybody into our country who's been to one of the countries that has Ebola circulating, I don't blame them one bit. And no, not a chance. Do I feel like we need to go and ask the World Health Organization for permission to make a decision like that? That's exactly why the U.S. pulled out, and that's exactly why we should be autonomous of the World Health Organization. Last one I'm going to get to on this episode of Scott Fox After 9. In Toronto, the mayoral candidate that I think he's pretty well the only declared one of major concern. There's a lot of people who have said, I'm running for mayor. They might get 5 or 10 votes. Their friends will vote for them, maybe. But serious contenders, it seems like there's only one in the race so far. His name is Brad Bradford. What Brad here is doing is he's going to take on an issue that may have affected you personally. These e-bikes and scooters that are all over the streets. Now, Brad is running for mayor of Toronto. Believe it or not, those e-scooters are actually illegal in Toronto. You're not allowed to have them in Toronto, but people do, and the police are not enforcing it. What Brad here wants to do is create some common sense rules and regulations around those e-bikes and e-scooters, particularly the ones that go faster than 32 kilometers an hour. Here's Brad Bradford.
A set of pedals welded to a motorcycle-shaped frame does not make it a bicycle. Every week we all see them. Mini motorcycles ripping through bike lanes, riding up on the sidewalks, interfering with pedestrians, or parked in the hallway of your apartment where the batteries have a tendency to catch on fire. It's not working. Whether you are crossing the street or riding your bike or stuck in your vehicle, the behavior of some of these mini motorcycles is reckless. It is putting you at risk. Now, we're told this is the cost of living in a big city. I do not accept that. Mayor Chow is content to wait. I am not. It's time for action. As mayor, I will crack down on these mini motorcycles to make it safer for everybody. The first thing we're going to do is update our city bylaw to make sure that these vehicles that can go faster than the e-bike speed limit are not operating in our bike lanes. We also need these high-powered mini motorcycles to be licensed and insured. I'll work with the province to make that happen. And we need to grant the police the authority to seize and impound illegally modified e-bikes. Because a city we can be proud of keeps people safe on our sidewalks, on our roads, and across Toronto.
Very good campaign video there from Brad Bradford laying out his plan for the e-scooters and e-bikes. Now, when it comes to the e-bikes, the ones that have been modified that go faster than 32 kilometers an hour, I think it's interesting that he wants anyone riding one of those to need a license to do it and insurance. How are we going to handle these things that are weaving in and out? They're on the sidewalk, then they cut down to the bike lanes, then they go into the actual traffic lanes, and they're just all over the place, being real quick around people that are elderly, around kids, around people walking their dogs. I don't think it's a good idea to have motorized vehicles on a sidewalk. And when it comes to the bike lanes, those are supposed to be for scooters and bikes. Should we have somebody going more than 32 kilometers an hour in a bike lane, or should they be on the road with other vehicles? Hey, that's a discussion we can have. I'd love to know what you think of that. I personally don't care. And full disclosure, I'm a little bit biased on this because I do have an e-scooter. The youngest wanted it. And I thought, you're crazy. You're never going to use it. And as it turns out, he doesn't use it. I was absolutely right. He doesn't use it because I use it a lot. I love these scooters. I think they're great, but they are pretty quick. And you know what? If you're not a responsible operator, you could be a real menace to people walking their dog or elderly people, parents with young kids, or just people trying to get from A to B. Is it really a good idea for these things to be on the sidewalk? And one more question about this. Who's going to enforce it? Right now, those e-scooters are illegal in the city of Toronto. Toronto police are not taking them away from people who are caught using them. Doesn't seem like they're ticketing people. Doesn't seem like there's been any arrests made or anything like that. So what are we doing here? What's really going on here? We need some common sense rules and regulations to keep people safe. Friends, a slightly shorter edition today. That's okay. I don't want to waste your time. I just want to give you the important stuff. I am getting ready for listener DMs on Friday, though. If you want to weigh in on this wave of ticks and Lyme disease that apparently can make you allergic to red meat, by all means, slide into my DMs. If you want to talk about the Snowbirds, if you want to talk about e-bikes and e-scooters, by all means, let me know. I would love to hear from you on any topic that I covered today in After 9 or whatever comes up between now and Friday. Have yourselves a great one. I will catch you right back here tomorrow with another edition of Scott Fox After 9. Pat James and The Whole Truth now. Hey now.